Call me crazy, but I feel pretty good about Auburn coming out of the bye week.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tiger, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Today's show is brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Happy Ferg Friday to all who celebrate. Joining us today, Justin Ferguson of the Auburn Observer. I mentioned this earlier in the week, Jay Ferg, but I like Auburn's chances against Arkansas following the bye week. Is that crazy?
No, I don't think it's crazy. I think Arkansas has been susceptible to some things that Auburn might be able to do, particularly on the ground. Auburn came off of a really, really good game running the ball against Ole Miss. I think a lot of that had to do with kind of the way Ole Miss plays defense, and I see some similarities in the way Arkansas plays defense as well. And if you think back, some of the games where Arkansas had that struggle, the losing streak they went on there here recently, those games, teams were able to run the ball pretty effectively on Auburn. So you do that. It's a home game. You feel like you might be able to get some things. I think the one thing that should be really, really concerning though about that game is, like Ole Miss, Arkansas can run the ball exceptionally well. They run the ball more than any other non-academy team in college football this year. Only Army, Navy, and Air Force run the ball more times per game than Arkansas does. So that's something you got to tighten up. Maybe the off week helps with that. Maybe. I mean, that's got to be your best bet. But, I think this game could kind of go like the Ole Miss game did last week. And, maybe Auburn's got a little bit more to them coming off an off week and also playing at home.
How do you feel? What's your confidence level in Bryan Harsin and this staff off of a bye week, right? It's always a fun stat when these great coaches coming out of a bye week. Gus Malzahn was pretty good out of a bye week, if I remember correctly. What's your confidence level in Bryan Harsin post-bye week?
Yeah, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure Bryan Harsin's pretty good coming off of off weeks in his tenure as a head coach at the FBS level. It's interesting. I think healing up is going to be the big thing for some of these guys. Some of these bumps and bruises they might have had at the line of scrimmage from these last couple of weeks, that'll get healed up. 7 games into the year, though, I think what Auburn struggles at and what Auburn's probably a little bit better at is you kind of are who you are at that point. Like, I don't think Auburn's run defense is going to get magically any better. But, you are coming off of a game where you figured some things out in the running game. Your best player looked really, really good in Tank Bigsby. And, you have some time to kind of figure some things out on offense, maybe what you can do to scheme up to have a little bit more success in the passing game. So, I think the bye week's coming at a pretty good time for Auburn in the fact that it's, they didn't get blown off the field against Ole Miss. They get to reset a little bit. Right. And then they have, 3 of their last 5 games are at home it'll be tough to win them. It'll be tough to win, beat A&M or Mississippi State or Arkansas. But I wouldn't rule Auburn out completely out of any of them from what we saw on offense against Ole Miss a week ago.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about Auburn coming out of the bye week is where this team is mentally and emotionally, because as much as, the anti-Harsin crowd wants to, scream and proclaim from the rooftops that this team has given up, I don't know how you could possibly make that argument, being down 21-0 and rallying back. I mean, this is a team that, people want to point to the argument on the sideline. I like it. It shows passion. It shows that they care. I think, you may need a little bit more of that. So does this week off help that? Does it hurt that? Does it have any impact at all? To me, that's the most interesting thing coming out of this.
Yeah, I don't think it can hurt. I really don't think it can hurt you that much. I mean, Auburn isn't a team that's given up. This is not a team that's given bad for. This is just not a very good football team, right? But they still have talented pieces. They still had some high points and they've had some bright spots. It's just, can you kind of cobble them together? I go back to something that Owen Paffo said last week after the Ole Miss game, and he said, every time we feel like we fix something, there's something else popping up.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we ever can get, everything kind of clicking at once, we feel like you can still be a team that wins football games, and it can be successful this season. The clock is ticking, the time's running out on that to happen. But, I think you got to put a little bit, Auburn's pass defense has gotten better the last year. I guess the first 3 weeks of the year, they looked really rough. And then in SEC play, they've held their own. Hasn't been perfect, but they've held their own. It's just, can they get that run defense kind of going again? And then, figure some things out on offense. And, playing at home, playing against some teams in Arkansas and A&M and Mississippi State where they either have some flaws or Auburn on paper is a more talented team than those teams. You can't completely lie. So I do think what happens in the off week is going to be interesting, but I don't see this team packing it in yet. They had a really easy chance to do so against Ole Miss, and they didn't, and they gave themselves a chance, to potentially take the lead in that game, and it just fell by the wayside. So, this is not a team that's given up. It's just not a team that's playing good football, and there is a big difference in that.
The thing I like most about the matchup with Arkansas, and you mentioned it, is Arkansas's pass defense stinks. Yeah, and then the eye test, I think it's worse than Ole Miss's. And I just think if Auburn is going to win the game right now, I know this rushing attack and this offense is all about Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter, but in order to open that up, you got to have respect for what Robby Ashford's able to do. And I think Robby Ashford is going to be able to pass the ball on Arkansas, which is good. The issue is Arkansas also can rush the passer very, very well, and that could be that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Auburn's been very mistake prone and turnover prone with Robby Ashford, the quarterback. You got to live with the bad and the good with him as your quarterback right now. He can keep plays alive. He can, maybe the fact that they can rush the passer, maybe open some things up. When I hear they can rush the passer, but their pass defense, their secondary's not been very good.
Yeah.
I think for a guy like Robby Ashford, it's like, hey man, scramble, keep some plays alive, and you're going to get some open shots downfield. You got to do some of that. And then like I said, Arkansas's run defense is not very good. And neither is Texas A&M's. I think State's has been all right. I think this year, but maybe not. I'm trying to go back through it in my head, this is not going to be a team that comes. Arkansas is not going to come in there and just have this ultra dominant defense. Watch some of the games they've played this year. Look at some of the box scores. They've played some shootouts, and you feel more comfortable if you're in a shootout. If you're at home, you feel more comfortable if you're playing a team where it's like, hey, this is going to be a game where the defenses are going to have a tougher time. You got to be home team in that scenario, and so I think for Auburn, I think that's something you got to be able to lean on in this one.
Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer, our guest today. In just a second, let's discuss, did Auburn find something out on the offensive line with Jeremiah Wright getting a larger role there, or was it just because it was against Ole Miss? What can we expect moving forward? We'll tell you in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. This has become my favorite way to play daily fantasy sports, because there's so many different ways to do it. It's really not just daily fantasy. A lot of best ball leagues where you draft a team and you don't have to touch it for the rest of the season. It's just kind of fun to follow. You don't have to worry about starting and sitting guys or IR management or anything like that. You just draft a team and you let it go. And so I did that for the NBA. And with really the daily fantasy aspect of the NBA, that's a lot of fun. And of course, with college football returning tomorrow, obviously Auburn will not be on the slate, but hey, maybe that'll allow you to kind of branch out and watch more games. So be sure to check it out. Sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's one word, LOCKEDON, one word. And Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in your phone's app store. Justin Ferguson, our guest today. All right, so Jeremiah Wright started on the offensive front, J-Ferg, and the offensive line looked better. Tank Bigsby looked phenomenal. Is that just because of the matchup with Ole Miss, or do you think this offensive line maybe started to figure something out?
Maybe a little bit of it. I think Ole Miss, you got to go back to the fact that they run a 3-2-6 and that they didn't really load the box a ton, and Auburn countered with a lot more tight end usage in this game. It worked, man. It's just the same thing they did to Ole Miss in 2021 to great success, and they did it again on the ground in 2022. They just didn't have the same passing game that they did in 2021 because your quarterback's different. You know, your quarterback's different. Some of your receivers are different. You don't have Bo Nix. You don't have Kobe Hudson. You don't have some of those guys. But they were able to run the ball very effectively. It's the best running game Auburn's had against an SEC opponent since 2017, which is kind of wild to think about.
Yeah.
And I like Jeremiah Wright. You know, I watched every rushing play, every true rushing attempt Auburn had in this game for the film room this week, and I noticed that Jeremiah Wright was getting to the second level a decent bit, and that's something we haven't really seen a ton from Auburn's guards or their interior linemen this year. Just kind of get mucked up in the zone scheme at the line of scrimmage, and you can't get to the second level. Wright was able on a few plays just kind of spring some big runs. Because he was out there, he got out there and he planted a few guys as well in run blocking. Now, it wasn't perfect. Every offensive line linemen had their struggles in this game, but
sure.
Yeah, maybe you got something there. Maybe you got something there with him. You know, that he's kind of getting to turn it loose. He's a big guy. He's a physical guy. He moves well, obviously from his defensive line days. Maybe you got a little bit there. Maybe you got something there. And I also think that, you know, Brendan Coffey coming in for Austin Troxell. It's just Troxell's had injuries, and it just hadn't been quite the same for him this year. Maybe that helps you out a little bit. So I would put most of what Auburn did on the ground against Ole Miss due to the fact of how Ole Miss lines up on their defense and how Auburn schemed it. But I think there's some things you can kind of take from it moving forward, because even though I think Auburn was a little too boom or bust to the ground game in that game, over half their carries went for 2 or fewer yards still. The explosive ones that they had, I felt like the offensive line was really getting good push and, you know, kind of create stuff at the second level.
Yeah. What do you think about just on the offensive line, or I guess really any position group, but specifically the offensive line, changing stuff just for the sake of changing stuff? Just because clearly what you were doing wasn't working. This worked a little bit more. Are you in favor of that, or is that ridiculous?
I don't think it's totally ridiculous. I think you do have to change things at times and find something that may work. I think in this game, you know, Coffey comes in to play right tackle for Troxell because Troxell didn't make the trip, right? And, you know, you had a situation where Jeremiah Wright started for the very first time, really got his first extended playing time all year, and then Cam Stutz goes out early, and you put Keandre Jones in, and you're able to move it there. You don't see Alex Jackson in this game, so that might have been an injury thing as well. Yet you were willing to kind of shake some things up. You're getting some more young guys in at wide receiver, which I think is a good thing for Auburn. Offensively, I saw some changes and I saw some tweaks. You know, we talked about this last week. Like, how much are they going to really change? How much are they really going to adapt? And what it's kind of looking like a no-win situation for this coaching staff. Well, they'll do some things differently against Ole Miss, and it works. Haven't seen that much on the defensive side, but I do think on offense, you are moving some guys around and getting some new personnel, and it's worth a shot at this point. You know, you gotta have a miracle to get bowl eligible. You gotta have a miracle. Yeah. Honestly, I think if you're this staff to hang around, so you know, why not try some stuff?
Do you think? I mean, obviously, Will Friend is getting a lot of hate. Auburn's offensive line coach. Is that valid, do you think, or was he kind of given a situation that's a little tough to deal with regardless?
I don't put it all on Will Friend. I don't. I think we knew this was coming for Auburn's offensive line. It was just like maybe they take a step forward. Now, their regression, I think, is a tough thing, and that's kind of what we've seen across the board from Auburn's team. Is like when you look at this staff, it's like, yeah, this wasn't the deepest and most talent-filled roster in certain spots that you had, but still you shouldn't be going backwards, right? If you're getting older, you shouldn't be getting worse in time. So, but no, this Auburn offensive line, I wrote about it like the month after Bryan Harsin got hired. And it's that, you know, Auburn's offensive line recruiting, of teams that recruit in the blue chip ratio in college football, Auburn's offensive line recruiting is by far the worst. And this is kind of coming home to roost this year. Because you had to bring back a lot of super seniors and guys who had injuries in the past and hadn't necessarily been great offensive linemen in terms of how they worked as a collective. Yeah. But that's all you could rely on because you weren't recruiting well and you had recruited well in the past. What you inherited was rough and it didn't get any better. So, you know, it's easy to blame it all on one person, and it's easy, like, you know, and it's also easy to, you know, and I see fans doing this as well. It's like, it's also easy to say, well, this is all Gus Malzahn's staff's fault.
Sure.
And it's like, no, there's a lot more nuance to that, because I think it is a tough situation, but it didn't get any better. And in fact, on the field, in some cases, it's regressed now. However, Auburn did, like you said, run the ball pretty well against Ole Miss. If they can keep it up for the rest of the year, that's a good sign. But yeah, to this point, they have just taken a big step back with what they had inherited, and that's a bad sign.
Yeah. All right, Jay Ferg, I want to talk about little Auburn basketball in just a moment, and I will present the question to you. Who is the most important Auburn Tiger on this roster going into the season? We'll touch on that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Frisky Whiskey. If you're in the Auburn, Opelika, Lee County area, make sure you are equipped and ready to go for game day. And the cheapest, most inexpensive way to do all of this is to drive over to see our friends at Frisky Whiskey. The best prices on the best selection of any type of adult beverage, whether it is beer, wine, whiskey, vodka, tequila. They also have all of your mixers, so it's your one-stop shop for everything you could possibly need for your tailgate, or if you're just watching a lot of football from your living room and you want to make sure that you've got plenty of alcohol ready to go for the weekend. Be sure to check out our friends at Frisky Whiskey. Jay Ferg, before we jump into talking a little hoops action, what all's going on at the Auburn Observer?
Yeah, so we've had a week where there's been a lot of basketball. I wrote a story on Wendell Green Jr. from SEC Media Days in Birmingham this week. Check that out. Wrote a story on how Auburn was picked to finish, and has been picked to be a top 15 team in the country and a top 4 team in the SEC, despite the fact that they lost 2 All-Americans and they don't have any preseason All-SEC players, and just what that means for Bruce Pearl and kind of how the program he's built to this point. Mailbag out today. Painter did the mailbag this week. That's our off-week tradition, so you can check that out. We also did a podcast this week where our premium podcast talking some basketball, both for Auburn basketball, and then some of the former Auburn Tigers that started their NBA careers this week. You can check all that out at auburnobserver.com. It's $6 a month to $60 a year to get the full subscription. Everything we do gets sent straight to your email inbox. And so we'll take it a little bit easier this week, a little bit lighter this weekend with the off weekend. But we will hit it right back hard at the beginning of next week, previewing Arkansas and getting closer and closer to the start of Auburn basketball season. Yep.
All right, so let's talk a little Auburn basketball. Who do you think is the most important player on this roster?
This is a great question because you can go in so many different directions with it. I think the most important player on this team, and not just to trumpet my own thing from a couple days ago, I think it's Wendell Green Jr. I think Wendell Green Jr. as a point guard, as the guy who is turning into the dude at point guard, and he looks like he's going to be the floor general this year. Had great numbers last season, great impact. His net rating was huge last season. Posted some of the best assist-to-turnover ratio numbers. He got active on defense for a guy his size. Had a really good year, but didn't shoot the ball very efficiently. Mm-hmm. And that's something he's got to tighten up on. If he can be a more efficient scorer, and what we've seen from him kind of taking that step forward now that he has that experience and that familiarity, I think you could see an offense. You look at Auburn's offense this year and team in general, a ton of depth, a ton of pieces. They're going to be able to beat you on offense in a lot of different ways. They're going to be able to go with a more traditional inside game. They're still going to have a lot of shooters. They're still going to run. They have that depth to be physical. And so for all that to work, to maximize that, you need a point guard that can do it all and kind of run the show. So for me, it's Wendell Green. This team's strength's going to be their depth. It's going to be the fact that they can throw a lot of different things at you. This is going to be a strength in numbers team, probably more than any other one we've seen with Bruce Pearl. But
sure,
if I had to pick just one guy to say that's most important, be the point guard.
I think that makes sense. A quote that you pulled from him talking to the media earlier this week up in Birmingham. He said, "I'm more relaxed in every situation. I just feel like I'm more relaxed." Was that an issue for him last year? I mean, he seemed pretty relaxed at times last year too. Do you expect that to look different this year for Wendell Green?
Yeah, it's interesting because when he said that, he was just like, he said last season, like he remembered going to the Tennessee game and Thompson Bowling, 20,000 people all just like screaming and going nuts and just that atmosphere for that game. And he said, he's like, I was looking around like, man, this is crazy. And it's like, you kind of get a little starry-eyed a little bit there. And there were some times last season where, in the games, Arkansas, Florida, some other ones where Wendell had the ball in his hands and it didn't work out down the stretch. And it felt like, it just, those end possessions weren't great for him. So you feel like there's going to be that comfort, that familiarity. I think you go back to watching him in Israel, his vision seems to have improved on the floor. It was already really, really good. So I just think it's that familiarity and that comfort where it's like last year, it's like, okay, I'm a mid-major point guard stepping up to high major basketball, and this is a lot of pressure. And I'm playing with these NBA players, and we're going for an SEC title. There's a lot of pressure. Now it's year two. It's like he's a veteran. He's a team leader. He's been through the fire before, and I think that just gives you a comfort level that just affects every part of your game where you're not learning on the fly. You're not, nothing's going to take you by surprise this year.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to translate, and hopefully for Auburn, a more efficient Wendell Green on the floor. But even what you got last year from him was really, really good. It'll be interesting to see how he steps up from that.
Justin Ferguson, one more time, give us a quick rundown on how people can support the Auburn Observer.
Yeah, it's auburnobserver.com. Check it out. It's $60 a month or $60 a year. Everything we do gets emailed to your inbox, so all of our newsletters, all of our podcasts. You get about 2 to 3 podcasts a week. You get about 4, 5, 6 newsletters a week as well, covering Auburn football and men's basketball. A lot of deep dives. And as we get closer and closer to basketball season, the more we'll start doing that as well. So auburnobserver.com, check it out.
Yep. Be sure to check it out. It's worth it. You can find all of my written work at auburndaily.com, and we'll see you on Sunday. This has been Locked On Auburn.